Hidden beneath the deepest vaults of Windsor lies a small, unassuming box. On its surface, just two chilling words: "Never again." Sealed by Queen Elizabeth II herself, it remained untouched for decades, until a private royal archivist cracked its lock after her death. What they found inside sparked panic, heartbreak, and silence. Before we start, your support through a like and subscribe means a lot. Thank you. It began with a quiet inventory. Routine, methodical, unremarkable. After Queen Elizabeth's death, a team was dispatched to begin the daunting process of cataloging her personal effects. The vaults were sealed under centuries of protocol and layers of silence, and only a handful of archivists were given access. They were sworn to confidentiality, escorted by security, and restricted to manual records. Among rows of jewel cases, ceremonial folders, and embossed boxes, one item didn't match the rest. It was small, plain, no insignia, just a note on its lid, written in the Queen's own steady hand. Never again. The room reportedly fell silent. Even in the aftermath of a monarch's passing, there are things that feel untouchable, and this was one of them. Protocol dictated the box be set aside for senior clearance, but one archivist, a trusted name from decades of service, was allowed to open it. Not for the public, not for the press, only to assess, document, and report. What they found inside has never been officially confirmed, but according to multiple palace insiders, the contents were deeply personal, emotionally devastating, and politically explosive. Inside, nestled in a deep blue velvet pouch, was a single piece of jewelry. Not part of the crown jewels, not listed in any royal collection inventory. Something privately owned, something never worn in public. Alongside it, a folded note in Elizabeth's handwriting, fragile with age, yet deliberate in tone. The archivist reportedly read it only once, then stood up, shaking. The pouch was returned, the box resealed. Hours later, the archivist was escorted out of the building and quietly retired. No formal explanation was given. Their name has not appeared in any royal employment register since. In the days that followed, access to that wing of the vault was restricted. Security protocols were heightened. Even among the senior courtiers, whispers began to circulate. The Queen had kept something back, and she'd buried it with a curse. Within a week, Camila, now Queen Consort, made a private visit to the vault, accompanied only by Charles and a legal advisor. No photographs, no press, no statement. But staff noted she emerged looking pale and refused to speak for the rest of the day. One insider would later describe her expression as that of someone confronted by a ghost. Despite growing curiosity, the royal collection issued a firm response. No such box exists. No such note was catalogued. No such jewel has been recorded in any official ledger. But behind closed doors, it's a different story. Every member of the royal family has reportedly been warned. Do not ask about the box. Do not attempt to wear the piece. Do not invoke the Queen's final request. But to understand the pain etched into that handwritten note, we have to go back to a night that changed the Queen forever. A night marked not by duty, but by devastation. There was one night Queen Elizabeth never spoke of, not to her husband, not even to her closest advisors, but in her private diaries she relived it again and again. What happened that night shattered a royal bond and led to a vow that would shape the fate of a priceless piece of royal history. It began with a dinner meant to restore calm. Tensions had been rising for weeks between Elizabeth and her younger sister, Margaret. Whispers had reached the Queen, whispers about a man the palace disapproved of, and even worse, a gift. Not a letter, not a token, but a jewel. a lavish custom emerald necklace delivered discreetly to Kensington. And Margaret, bold and headstrong as ever, wore it that night under her shawl, as if daring her sister to notice. Elizabeth noticed, and she said nothing at first. As the conversation turned to royal duties and upcoming engagements, Margaret made a casual remark that lit the fuse. She planned to wear the emerald necklace to an upcoming state gala. Elizabeth froze. The air around the table changed. She didn't raise her voice, but her words cut through the formality with clinical precision. "You will not wear it," she said. "Not in public. Not ever." Margaret tried to protest. She called it a gift, a personal possession. Elizabeth responded with a single phrase that chilled the room. "It poses a reputational risk to the crown." And just like that, the argument ignited. Margaret accused her sister of jealousy, of cruelty, of never allowing her happiness. Elizabeth, ever the monarch first, reminded Margaret of duty, of legacy, of the thin thread upon which public favor rested. But Margaret wasn't having it. She stood, trembling, and removed the necklace from around her neck. With tears in her eyes, she placed it on the table. "Then lock it away like everything else," she snapped. And she left the palace in silence. She would not return for weeks. Elizabeth sat alone long after the table had been cleared. The necklace remained where Margaret had left it, cold, gleaming, unblinking. That night, Elizabeth wrote in her diary, not as queen, but as a sister. Her words bled pain. "Tonight, I chose the crown. Again, and again, I lose her. Never again." It was the first time those words appeared. They would not be the last. In the days that followed, the necklace was quietly removed from view. It was not returned. It was not listed. It was not spoken of. It was wrapped in velvet and placed into a box. A plain box, marked only by a single phrase. A promise made not to the world, but to herself. But the jewel wasn't just a casualty of royal protocol. It was tied to a man the crown had erased, and to a love story they forbade. His name was struck from official records, his photographs removed from palace corridors. Yet he once held the heart of a future queen's sister, and gifted her something that would haunt the monarchy forever. The man behind the scandal was never supposed to exist. Not in official archives, not in court memoirs, not in the carefully sanitized timelines of Princess Margaret's life. He was a shadow, an unnamed figure whispered about in guarded tones, always followed by a pause and a change of subject. But behind the palace walls, his presence had been deeply felt. Some believed he was an aristocrat with ties to a disgraced continental royal house. Others claimed he was an MI6 officer, embedded so deeply in post-war intelligence operations that even his birth records had been scrubbed. And then there were the darker rumors, allegiances from the war that could not be forgiven, connections to a European regime the crown had tried to distance itself from. What is known, or rather, what has been pieced together from silenced staff and diary fragments, is that Margaret met him at a diplomatic reception, well before her name was splashed across front pages. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something more dangerous. Recognition. They shared a defiance the palace had always tried to snuff out. And within months, he had given her something that would one day threaten the crown's emotional foundation. A custom emerald necklace, cut from stones of disputed origin and arranged in a pattern that resembled encrypted wartime code. It was no ordinary gift. The emeralds were too rich, the settings too precise, the symbolism too pointed. Hidden among the facets were rumored inscriptions, numbers, initials, even the outline of a forgotten European crest. When Elizabeth caught wind of it, she didn't hesitate. She summoned Margaret for what insiders described as a violent conversation carried out in calm tones. Elizabeth demanded to know the truth about the man, the gift, and the intentions behind it. Margaret refused to betray him. What followed was the unraveling of not just a relationship, but a sisterhood. The man disappeared from Margaret's life almost overnight. Some said he was sent abroad. Others swore he was silenced in more permanent ways. Either way, he was gone. But the necklace remained, a dangerous artifact that neither Elizabeth nor the palace knew how to explain or destroy. Margaret was forced to surrender it, not to a vault, not to the royal collection, but directly into Elizabeth's hands. That handover, quiet and cold, marked a fracture that would never heal. The Queen placed the necklace into the velvet pouch herself, wrapped it in silence, and consigned it to a place where memory was meant to fade. But Margaret never forgot. She never forgave. And Elizabeth, though unmoved in public, would return to that moment in her writings, always circling back to one line: "What begins in secrecy ends in sorrow." The necklace, by royal order, was never to be worn again. But even locked away, the necklace refused to be forgotten, because someone tried to claim it and nearly lost everything. Long before she was queen, Camilla made a quiet request that rattled Elizabeth's composure and reopened a wound she had spent decades trying to forget. What she asked for was simple. What it symbolized: anything but. It began, as so many royal controversies do, with curiosity, Camilla's curiosity. She had long been fascinated by the hidden vaults of Windsor, the rooms beyond public view, filled not only with priceless treasures, but with relics of pain, silence, and power. As Charles moved closer to the throne, Camilla's interest in the family's deeper layers intensified. Not the tiaras she could already borrow, not the brooches for Commonwealth ceremonies, but the forbidden, the unspoken. She had heard the whispers that somewhere in those vaults, locked away, was a necklace the Queen had refused to catalogue. One with emeralds unlike any others, one tied to a royal scandal no one dared to name. And so, with what she thought was discretion, Camilla asked. It was meant to be for a private gala, one hosted by a foreign dignitary with little media coverage. The request was made through an aide. But when it reached Elizabeth, the reaction was immediate and volcanic. The Queen did not pause. She did not consult advisers. She simply responded, "Absolutely not." What made the moment chilling, however, was not the refusal. It was the fury beneath it. According to insiders, Elizabeth's voice shook when she added, "That piece brings ruin." The aide was dismissed, the request shut down. But the real message had already been delivered. Camilla had touched something sacred, and she was now part of its curse. Behind closed doors, the tension between the two women escalated. Publicly, they remained cordial. Photographs were taken, smiles exchanged. But within the walls of the palace, something had fractured. Elizabeth saw the request not as innocent curiosity, but as intrusion, an attempt to resurrect a chapter she had buried not just in stone and steel, but in shame. She reportedly confronted Camilla in private, saying, "Some things are not worn, some things are buried." And Camilla, unaccustomed to such coldness, was stunned. It was a clash not just of personalities, but of eras, of wounds carried versus wounds witnessed. Charles became involved, albeit reluctantly. He understood both women, Elizabeth's need to guard the monarchy's memory and Camilla's desire to step fully into her evolving role. But even he saw the danger. In a private moment, according to one former courtier, he told Camilla quietly, "Drop it forever. There are things in this family that even I won't touch." And she did. Publicly, at least. The necklace remained sealed, the box untouched. But something about Camilla's request had reawakened the legend. The whispers grew louder, and they reached the ears of someone else. Someone who would not only find the box, but unlock the one thing Elizabeth had tried so desperately to keep hidden. But Camila wasn't the only one who touched the edge of the forbidden. Years later, another woman would discover the box, and the note inside would leave her trembling. She didn't mean to find it. But when Catherine opened the small box tucked behind royal correspondence, what she read rewrote everything she thought she knew about the Queen's legacy and her own future. It was meant to be an ordinary task, just another quiet afternoon helping to prepare the archival transition of Elizabeth's personal effects. Catherine, meticulous and respectful, had volunteered to assist. No cameras, no staff, just her and a private secretary, sifting through decades of letters, tokens, and ceremonial minutiae that formed the Queen's private life. But then came the envelope, plain, unmarked, hidden behind a stack of holiday correspondence. As she lifted it, something small and heavy shifted behind it. A second layer, a false back. And there it was, the box. Catherine froze. She had heard stories, vague and cautionary. She knew there were things never spoken of, things cloaked in phrases like off limits and not for review. But this? It bore those same two chilling words etched into the lid. Never again. The phrase sent a jolt through her chest. And yet, against her better judgment, she opened it. Inside, folded with surgical precision, was a handwritten letter in Queen Elizabeth's unmistakable pen. The paper was worn at the creases, but the ink hadn't faded. It was dated nearly 30 years ago. The necklace, still nestled in velvet, lay beneath it, untouched. But it was the words that broke her. The note began not with duty or declaration, but confession. Elizabeth wrote not as queen, but as a woman haunted by a decision that had cost her a sister's trust. She spoke of betrayal, not just Margaret's heartbreak, but her own failure to protect what little remained of their bond. She described the necklace not as a gift, but as a wound made visible. A wound she tried to bury in velvet and steel. But the most harrowing part came at the end. Elizabeth, usually composed and resolute, had written a line that sounded like desperation cloaked in duty. If this box is opened by blood, let them know. This is not a jewel. It is a curse. I chose silence. Never again. It wasn't a royal command. It was a plea. Catherine's hands trembled. She read it twice, then again. By the third reading, she was crying. It wasn't the scandal, or the mystery, or even the tragedy. It was the loneliness that spilled from Elizabeth's words. A monarch who had ruled with iron certainty, but crumbled in private over the ghosts of a single decision. Catherine left the room. According to those close to her, she didn't speak for hours. When William found her, the box was back in its hiding place, the letter resealed. She reportedly told him, "I shouldn't have seen it." And his reply, just as stark, was, "Put it back. Lock it. Say nothing." But silence never lasts in the palace, not when heirs, crowns, and buried secrets collide. Two factions, one priceless jewel, and a decades-old rule that no longer applied. After Elizabeth's death, the palace erupted in quiet chaos over what to do with the necklace, until one name was whispered, and everything shifted. For a brief moment after the Queen's passing, the monarchy appeared unified. The mourning was public, the protocol pristine. But behind the black veils and choreographed solemnity, there was discord, unspoken, but rapidly escalating. The moment her private effects were opened, the question resurfaced. What now becomes of the forbidden necklace? Charles, freshly crowned and eager to project a modern, transparent monarchy, saw an opportunity. To him, it was a relic of family history, no longer dangerous, no longer taboo. He proposed it be displayed in a controlled exhibit. No drama, no context. Just another jewel behind glass. But not everyone agreed. Anne and Edward, usually silent pillars in the family's machinery, stood together in rare defiance. They invoked what they called the Queen's last true command. Not a document, not a decree, but something far heavier. A legacy. Anne, who had once watched her mother's eyes darken at the mere mention of the necklace, refused to let it become spectacle. Edward, equally resolute, warned Charles, "If you undo her silence, you unravel everything she protected." Camilla, emboldened by her new status, saw it differently. She argued it belonged to the Royal Collection Trust, not the private vaults. That to bury it again would be to validate the very shame the monarchy claimed to have outgrown. Some say she even arranged for a special case to be prepared, a soft unveiling timed for the next royal exhibition. But she hadn't anticipated one crucial roadblock: Catherine. The pressure came quietly at first, a subtle suggestion from a senior aide, that perhaps Catherine might wear the necklace for an upcoming state event. The symbolism would be powerful, a new generation healing old wounds. But Catherine declined. Then declined again. And again. Her answer never changed, even when Charles himself reportedly asked her directly. She said it simply: "I will not be the one to wear it first." And in that refusal, the ghost of Elizabeth's command was reborn. The family fractured behind closed doors. Some aides described the atmosphere as cold civil war. Quiet meetings held in mirrored drawing rooms, tense silences during weekly lunches. At one point, a royal household staffer was overheard saying, "It's just a chain of stones, but it's pulling the whole family apart." Ultimately, the decision was made not through policy or consensus, but exhaustion. The necklace was returned to the box. The velvet was folded. The words "never again" were read one final time, and it was locked beneath Windsor, deeper than before. No one spoke of it afterward. No statements, no press briefings, just another invisible shift in the tectonic plates of royalty. But something changed after that battle, because someone outside the family wanted it back. One letter. No name. No return address. But a chilling claim: "The necklace belongs to me, and I can prove it." What followed was a security breach the palace never admitted. Until now. The letter arrived in a plain white envelope, hand-delivered to the gate at Kensington Palace. No postage, no fingerprints. Just 5 carefully typed lines on unmarked paper, with one message that sent shockwaves through the royal household. The sender claimed to be a descendant of the original giver of the emerald necklace, the same forbidden jewel that had nearly torn the family apart. More than a claim, it was an accusation that the piece had been stolen from its rightful owner in the aftermath of a royal cover-up, and that legal documents existed proving its inheritance had been fraudulently blocked by palace operatives. The letter ended with a warning: "If it is not returned, I will retrieve it myself." At first, the palace treated it as a prank, but behind the scenes, the tone shifted within hours. Security was quietly raised. A limited circle was informed. Within 48 hours, a second incident occurred. This time, far more serious. At one of Windsor's lesser-known access points, a delivery tunnel used only by high-clearance staff, alarms were tripped during a shift change. No entry was recorded, no exit either. But surveillance caught a shadow. One figure, dressed in black, disappearing into the hedges moments before backup arrived. Nothing was taken. Nothing was damaged. But the message was clear. Someone knew where to look. MI5 was alerted, unofficially. The operation was not labeled as an external threat or a matter of national security, at least not publicly. But agents were briefed. Digital forensics combed through communications between vault staff and royal advisors. Background checks were rerun, and the original letter was scanned for hidden codes, biological traces, or even microprinting. It revealed nothing. Not even the typewriter used could be traced. Meanwhile, rumors spread like wildfire among the staff. Some whispered that the claimant wasn't just a descendant of the mysterious man who once courted Princess Margaret, but his direct heir. An illegitimate child born of their affair, raised in secrecy, hidden away from press, politics, and protocol. Others believed it was a hoax, a diversion planted by a foreign agent or journalist fishing for scandal. But the most chilling theory? That someone inside the family had leaked the necklace's location in a desperate bid for leverage. Regardless of the truth, the Crown acted swiftly. All records of the letter were scrubbed. Vault access logs from that week were sealed under royal privilege. And the necklace, already entombed in silence, was moved again, deeper, beyond the reach of public record. The official line was simple. No such correspondence was received. But inside the palace, every door was suddenly a potential breach, every shadow a threat. And yet, for all their efforts to keep it buried, the truth was already beginning to surface in the most unexpected way. A BBC producer started piecing it together. Interviews, old footage, secret correspondences. What they found was too dangerous to air. Before filming was finished, the project was quietly shut down, but not before one clip leaked online. It began as a quiet side project. Internally, the BBC greenlit a niche historical documentary under the title The Forbidden Emerald. It was supposed to be a reflective look at royal jewelry never worn, never seen. Pieces lost to time or obscured by scandal. But within weeks, the tone shifted. A young researcher, combing through declassified Windsor storage logs, stumbled upon a phrase repeated in red ink and sealed with security codes. Never again. At first, it meant nothing, until they matched it to an unarchived item listed only once in a 1983 inventory. Emerald piece, no code. See memo. The memo, of course, was missing. The researcher flagged it to the producer. Intrigued, they chased the thread. Interviews were arranged. Former palace staff were contacted, some willing, others terrified. One, a now retired valet who had served under Elizabeth in the 1980s, gave the most damning quote during a recorded interview. It was the only piece Her Majesty ever handled personally. Wrapped it in silence, and I don't think even Charles knew why. The moment the clip aired during early production teasers, calls came in. Lawyers, palace advisors. Within 48 hours, the interview was wiped from the platform. Then came the shutdown. Officially, the documentary was postponed due to editorial restructuring. Unofficially, the pressure came from above, and it came hard. Legal notices were filed. The BBC's internal records of the project were encrypted and removed from general access. The lead producer was reassigned. The researcher's contract was not renewed. And the Forbidden Emerald vanished from the BBC's upcoming programming schedule without explanation. But it didn't all disappear. One clip survived. It wasn't meant to. It wasn't even meant for public release. A rough cut, shared via a private link, leaked online late one night. In the clip, grainy and blurred, was what appeared to be a still image of the necklace. Distinctive emerald clusters, partially obscured by cloth. And then, unmistakably, Queen Elizabeth's voice layered over it. Archival audio. Fragile, but clear. It will never be worn again. The clip was pulled down within hours, but not before it was mirrored and shared across closed forums and encrypted threads. The royal family refused to comment. Not a word. But the palace panic was real. Aides were reassigned, devices checked. The Crown's legal team began quietly reviewing every NDAs signed by staff over the last 4 decades. Not because of the leak, but because of what it might trigger. What else might surface? And who might start asking questions next? And so, the necklace remains unseen. But one question echoes louder than ever. It wasn't politics. It wasn't scandal. It was heartbreak. Queen Elizabeth could handle betrayal, shame, and controversy, but she could never forgive herself for the one life destroyed by her crown. And so she sealed the necklace, and her guilt. In the final decade of her reign, Elizabeth wrote more than she spoke. In carefully penned letters never sent, in diary entries never meant to be read, she returned again and again to one name: Margaret, the sister whose light had once dazzled the world, and whose slow, quiet dimming haunted her to the end. What began as defiance, as rebellion, as flair, ended in stillness, withdrawal, and aching absence, and behind it all, Elizabeth saw not just the weight of duty, but her own hand, steady and ruthless, pressing Margaret down. The emerald necklace, long buried, had become something more than a forbidden heirloom. It had morphed into a symbol of all the pain the monarchy could not say aloud. It was the object through which power had crushed emotion, where love was sacrificed at the altar of legacy. Elizabeth didn't speak of it in public, but in her private reflections, it became clear. She had never stopped seeing it. In every family fracture, every estranged glance across a palace corridor, every clipped headline about royal coldness, she saw that necklace gleaming in silence. There, in a rare unguarded entry, she had written, "A queen defends the crown. A sister must mourn alone. Never again shall I choose one at the cost of the other." That phrase, "never again," was not policy. It was penance, and it was repeated, deliberately, when she made the final choice that no one in the family knew about until it was too late. According to internal vault records, it was Elizabeth herself who requested the box, not an aide, not a courier. She signed the order, bypassed the usual chain of command, and walked it down the stone corridors beneath Windsor. Only one trusted archivist was present, who would later be sworn to lifelong silence. The Queen, in silence, placed the velvet pouch containing the emerald necklace back into the box. She read her own letter aloud once, then folded it, replaced the lid, and sealed it, not with wax, not with ribbon, but with the weight of her own guilt. But the final twist was this. The box was not returned to the Crown Vault. It was not entered into the royal collection. It was never catalogued again. Instead, Elizabeth ordered it to be entombed beneath the Chapel Royal, buried beneath layers of stone, known only to one logbook, now redacted, and a single line of instruction: not to be disturbed, not to be worn, not to be named. The emeralds still exist, but they are more than jewels. They are memory, regret, a silent scream caught in time. In a monarchy defined by tradition and legacy, there was one decision Elizabeth made not as queen, but as sister, and one jewel that no crown will ever touch again.